Hi, intro students. I wanted to go over quiz 2 review for you. I want to remind you that our quiz is coming up this Thursday. It's a 24-hour quiz, and the quiz will be in the same format as our first quiz. So true, false, multiple choice, short answer, and an essay. It's not a cumulative test, so it's from our quiz 1 content till now. So the end of our quiz 1, week 9, till the end of the semester. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go through what I'd like you to be paying attention to. So I'm starting with our presentation and readings, thinking about this shift into postmodernism. Let me get to the top of this. And the lectures are split up for this this long lecture or this long slideshow into 2 video lectures if you want to revisit those. But I'm going to go and start with our kind of shift into abstraction. And this abstraction, this conversation around how to think of or define abstraction, and in this case, what ends up being called abstract expressionism. You're looking at Jackson Pollock, who becomes a kind of quintessential character in this arena. And 2 people, Clement Greenberg and Harold Rosenberg, are 2 figures who try to kind of take what you're seeing here with Jackson Pollock and his abstract works, abstract paintings, and try to define not only what they mean for themselves, but what they mean for the direction of where art is and where it's headed. This is, if you're thinking about the definition Clement Greenberg is arguing for, he starts to define this term called formalism. He says that this type of painting, especially Pollock, the paintings are stripped of their associations. So illusionism, literature, they're really about and concerned with form and technique rather than content and artistic in creation. So if you're looking here, you're not really seeing anything that you see in the world necessarily. Nothing looks like this per se, no objects or things. There's no narrative, so it's not a story. It's even numbered to give it some distance from narrative, so it's not called The Death of Socrates or, Castle or something like that. It's has no focal point, no vanishing point, so it's not a landscape necessarily, or your eye moves all around it. If you saw it in person, you really could see that it's paint on canvas. You can even see the canvas in it, or through some of that paint. And so a lot of those illusions, the desire to look like something already existing in the world, like you're looking through a window, are broken down. And that kind of abstraction is the way we're thinking about it, okay? Now, the flip of that is the read by Harold Rosenberg, who really thinks of Jackson Pollock's artworks and his paintings as activities or actions, much closer to what starts to become some of our defining beginnings of performance art. He thinks of the paintings as exuding content and being very much, he calls them drip paintings, and being made up of this content of the life of the artist, decisions about the process, a dialogue with the conventions of painting. So it's not just about paint, but it's kind of pushing up against those norms of what painting is defined as. His paintings are not self-contained objects, but referential to much of its context, much of the world, right? So it's letting the world in, and it's about the world. And so when you're thinking about Rosenberg's definition, you're very much thinking about him breaking conventions like standing over a canvas rather than looking at it up on an easel. The painting's dripping. It's not being touched to the canvas like a traditional painting. The paint is falling to the canvas, and sometimes you even see footprints and cigarettes put out on to the canvas itself. And so a real break, right? He would say that you're very much asked as a viewer to think about what does it mean to do this, or rather than just what is it about, why would someone do this? Which really brings us back to something like the shift into postmodernity and what John Cage is pushing us to think of is what, as a viewer or audience member, what really is, here, this is in our way here, sorry guys, we have expectations, and we're, as viewers coming to artwork with expectations, and he would say, he would challenge those expectations and ask you to really consider what those expectations mean about your own personal definition of art. So if you're coming to a performance, a musical performance by the music composer John Cage, and you don't hear any piano played when he comes out and sits at a piano, those challenges, those breaks with your expectation, would be an opportunity for some people to think about why would he do that, and therefore what's the work about. But some people, shut down and are annoyed and walk away. So that also says something about a viewer's expectation of what they expect art to be about, or what they expect to get out of art. All right. Now, if we're thinking on those terms, again, formalism being a real argument being put forth by Clement Greenberg, and then action being put forward by Harold Rosenberg. Those two have conflicting ideas. They all end up challenging some of what is, it's like interrupting our expectations. It's challenging our expectations. Let me put, we start to see, I mentioned performance art, so I'll jump over Andy Warhol real quick. So if you're looking at these slides, I'll jump to performance art real quick. And you start to see the emergence of postmodern thought in the activity of performance art. And I'm going to just say most notably feminist performance art, mainly because when we think of postmodernity, we start to realize that there aren't very many women making or allowed to be at the visible level as artistic producers, and therefore their voice isn't as heard. And so you see this influx in the presentation in many different ways of women. Now there are a few tendencies that come out of the work of feminist performance art. So we have autobiographical and narrative. We've got mystical and ritual, and we've got political. I'd like you to look at some of those differences and see what their claim is with regard to performance art. But in general, when we're seeing this postmodern shift, and let me come down to, where's the art happening, right? It's not necessarily in the object anymore, it's in the contemplation of what happened. So we're really seeing a shift from nature to culture. So nature would be this illusionistic, try to make a painting look like the world, look like it's real, to this abstraction or artworks. I like this one on the right called A Combine by Robert Rauschenberg, where the painting is being painted directly onto the chair in front of it, right, which is an object. So it's no longer sculpture or painting, it's both. So we're seeing this kind of shift culturally, but I really like thinking about here the artwork becoming less objective, right? There's less kind of narrow objective truths and more subjective pluralistic truths or ideas. So claims to totality, claims to overarching explanations, claims to meta-narratives or finality in terms of defining terms are all getting obliterated by the idea that there's more subjectivity in terms of how people see the world and experience the world, and there's more of a pluralist need for more pluralist voices. So different members of what create life and culture and governments and artworks and ... need to be heard. Now, that is also then very much an end to totality. In a lot of ways, I think it's a very heavy claim that there's no neutrality, no neutral place to stand necessarily in the world. If you say you don't like politics or don't want to be political, that is a stance in and of itself. Okay, that's the idea. There's no neutrality. And this is very much a fragmentation, right? It's a fragmentation of some of those norms that have been put forward, and no longer is there a truth, there's many truths. Conceptual art comes out of this, or it starts to be defined as a movement, conceptualism, so where the idea becomes more important than maybe the craft or how artfully crafted an object is. We start to see that. I use this example, I think it's a really nice one of explaining some of conceptual art. This is called 1 in 3 Chairs. It's an artwork that defines for me where the defining of chair happens for a viewer. So is chair a picture of a chair, or is chair an object of a chair, or is chair a kind of text definition of chair, right? How do we define chair? And that becomes very subjective for all of us. Let me dive down here. I think we have some good examples. So we've got like Daniel Buren, where the stripes are being painted on the wall that leave the gallery or come in from outside the gallery, which really pushes against the convention that art happens inside of an art space. We've got our Adrian Piper, who's really pushing the audience to be self-conscious, no neutrality, right? Those are all very postmodernist, to where they are listening to the voice of a marginalized voice, woman talking about race, right? And some of those issues that aren't necessarily thought of as artistic concepts. And then forcing the audience to take a stance. Okay. This is another good example of conceptual art where the wall between the gallery and the art space, or the office space behind it, and what business happens in an art space is being revealed, is taken away, kind of like a curtain in Wizard of Oz. You get entrepreneurial artworks like Jeff Koons, who is a business person who runs a factory, much like Andy Warhol, and has people fabricate his artworks for him. And then in a very way today, let's go to an example like this. This is Chris Martin's vase, where he is questioning how value is constructed in the art world. So the vase gets exhibited by pushing over the vase, breaking it, and then reconstructing it, where conventionally the vase is in thousands of pieces, becomes increasingly fragmented and fragile with each cycle of its deconstruction and resurrection, even as the perceived value increases with the prestige conferred upon by the exposure of each additional exhibition. So the more it gets exhibited, the more fragmented it gets, the less structural it gets as a vase, but it becomes much more valuable in the art world because of the experience and its link to the art world, okay, and how that experience can be monetized. All right. Now, some of the artists that we're looking at with reference, we talked about Jeff Koons, we talked about Adrian Piper. Euclid here was the one who touched sanitation, where she went around and shook the hand of every sanitation worker in New York City. She also cleaned gallery spaces or museums and the front steps during open hours. So the maintenance that would happen during close hours, she would do during open hours. Mel Chin is really thinking about social change through his artwork, and so the definition of something like night crawlers, redefining how the media is presenting that term in his neighborhood as a negative and turning it into a positive by selling nightcrawler worms to fishermen. The Esther Gates, who takes artworks or makes artworks out of spaces that he inhabits in the south side of Chicago and rebuilds them for, artistic and commercial means or social means, and then sells that and repurposes that money to create more land developments. Catherine Opie, who's interested in how we define opposition to things. She's very interested in, cultural narratives around different marginalized groups. Marina Abramovich, who in our kind of performance art is the person who did Rhythm O, where she's challenging some of the perception of performance art and kind of social experiments. So she lays out a bunch of objects on a table and stands there not saying a word, and people start to take those objects and physically abuse her over the course of her performance, which is wild. Tanya Bruguera, her event-based art and activism and social change, take a look at that. And then to finalize some of this, ways of seeing, John Berger's interest in, I didn't say Santiago Sierra, did I? Santiago Sierra, when he's exploiting people as part of his installation, so where he'll line up workers in a gallery with their clothes off, facing the wall, and line them up based on their pay rate. That shows the gradation and the injustice in those areas. The discrimination that's going on. Ways of Seeing is our book, but I have a final episode that I show you a video. The thing that I really like in this video is the moment where we start to deconstruct how the women in this factory are making and bottling perfume to be sold at an expensive, at a expensive cost, and it's beyond their means to buy the thing that they're making and producing, right? And then getting utilized in advertisement as a function to tease people into thinking that what they have currently isn't enough. They always have to be thinking about the future. Right, this delayed or deferred future he talks about, where you're constantly dreaming of where you're not or where you haven't gotten to yet, like your vacation. When you're done with this, you'll have that, and so on and so forth. And really thinking about how art gets used to seduce us into those. So how advertising uses artists and their status culturally to try to elevate the quality or attractiveness of an object or artwork, of a commodity. Now, moving from there into these terms, this is the kind of process. In the first test, we talked about how artists put forward a candidate for appreciation. That's the artwork, their artifact. This enters into an art world. These are spaces like galleries, museums. There's viewers and audience members who are engaging in an artwork that's gone through this process, right? Now, we're talking very much about the expectations of the viewer. And usually if they're not being met, those expectations, if you're a viewer and are not, or you're frustrated, or you think you're expecting something and it's not there, that's a good indicator that there's something you should be questioning. Artists are often creating questions between concepts and ideas that don't normally get paired together, and those are usually attempts to make something new or to say something new about that. And then we think about artwork as having aboutness, right? For instance, there's a drawing that someone makes, and that drawing is a drawing and is also about something else. Think back way to the beginning of that scribble by Tom Friedman. And then this all in service of communication. Okay, communicating ideas, creating a mediated experience between something, the viewer and the artist, in order to communicate ideas. Now, I hope that helps. I think that's a good general synopsis of what I'd like you to be thinking about. Again, thinking in terms of the test, it's the same format as the first one, and it's this Thursday. If you've got any questions, don't hesitate to ask, and good luck. I look forward to giving you all great grades, and again, if you've got any questions or concerns, reach out to me sooner than later.